Hey there, today we are going to be talking about tracking time in Airtable. I speak with a lot of small business owners, and one of their biggest headaches is allowing their employees to effortlessly track their time in one place. There's all sorts of different tools for these things, and now you can get rid of whatever those tools are, whether that's Toggl or Harvest or whatever it is you've been using, and you can just use Airtable. Save time, save money, keep it all in one place. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so I am over here in my Airtable base, and we're starting with just a single table. Now I'm going to show you how we can leverage this new feature that Airtable gives us access to. It's actually new data that they give us access to, so that we can create a system that will allow employees to clock in and clock out at the push of a button. Okay, now there are layers within Airtable. If you're new to this, there's a data layer, which is the spreadsheet like what we're looking at. Then there's automations, which allow us to automate tasks. We'll be using that. And then there is the interface layer. And interfaces allow you to build pages. And what we're going to be doing first is going through and creating the data structure so that we can have an interface that someone can use to clock in and clock out. That is where your employees will be interacting with the data, not in this ugly looking spreadsheet. Unless you like the look of spreadsheets, then it's a nice looking spreadsheet. What I want to say about this is we are also going to be using Zapier. And if you've never used an integration tool before, Zapier is a really easy one to start with and allows you to connect tools together. I'll show you how we'll be using that in a moment. So, what's the new feature that Airtable released that allows us to access data previously not found? Well, let me show you that. Over in the automations panel, you'll see that, and if you're brand new to automations, definitely check out some basic videos on that. They are triggers and actions. The trigger doesn't matter for this example because I just want to show you access that we have to data through this dynamic picker. Now, when you click that blue plus, this is dynamic information, and you'll see that one of the pieces of information we can now get is a specific time. This is when the automation runs. So when someone, for instance, clicks a button that runs the automation, we get that timestamp, and that's what we need. With that in mind, let's jump over, and we are going to start creating the structure. All right, so the structure of this database is going to be simple. In our first table, we're going to call this projects. And it's going to store projects. It's very original. And we're going to start with project 2. I don't know why. Project 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to need another table. So we're going to go ahead and click on this plus, start from scratch. This table is going to be called time entry. This is where the time entries will go. I'm going to delete these fields that come standard with every new table you create. And then we're going to use what's called a linked record field. If you don't know what a linked record field is, it's the ability to associate information across tables. So in this case, we want to be able to tag a project saying that the time entry is for a project. More details on linked records in our channel, check them out. Definitely pause and go watch a video on linked records if you don't know what they are yet. Okay, so I'm going to say we're going to link to the projects table. So you'll see now this gives me a pick list of the different projects. Okay. Oops, I linked it to time entry. Don't do that. So we're going to set up a linked record field, and we are going to link to the projects table. And you'll see that what this gives us is a list of the projects that we can associate to a time entry. That works pretty good. All right, we're not going to worry about this first field for now. We're just going to leave that empty, but we are going to create a couple of other fields here. So first, we need someone to be able to tell us the start date and time. That's going to be using a date field configured with time. We'll go ahead and duplicate that field and give us end date and time. Okay, so someone can come in here and they will be able to select a date that they worked along with the time. So let's go ahead and fill this out. Let's say that we worked for an hour. So that's what that's going to look like. We also want this to be associated with a user, so we're going to use the user field. So when someone gets access to your base, we're going to turn notifications off. They become a drop-down value in this list, so I'll select myself. And then let's go ahead and set up a duration field. We're going to do this based on minutes. And I'll show you how you can do this. You'll use a formula. Okay. And you're going to use a function called datetime difference, and it gives you this handy sort of way to structure it. So the first value is going to be the end date. So it's your furthest time. All right. Then you're going to do a comma. Then you're going to have your start date. And then you're going to give it the units, which could be seconds, minutes, hours. We want minutes. And then you're just going to close the parentheses there. That's going to give you duration in minutes. Okay, so we've got an hour here. So that's perfect. Okay. And these will make more sense later, but I'm also going to create a checkbox called clock out. Okay, and then we're going to create a formula field that we're going to call Webhook. And I'm just going to put some text in quotes here to save it for later. Okay. And then finally, we're going to use a button field. Okay, this is going to be called clock out. We'll go ahead and throw a clock on here. And it's going to open that webhook URL once we put it in there. Okay, so it's all configured now. Those are our fields. Now what's really cool about this, remember we have a linked record to the project. So project 2. And so you'll see on the other end, we've got a tag here. Okay, that's this. So if we were to give it a name, let's just call it entry 1. You'll see that it shows up over here. And what that means is we've got access to its information. So for instance, if we had another entry here for project 2, so I'm going to go ahead and select project 2 from the list. Now I'm doing this manually right now. Remember, we're going to do this so that it's highly automated, so that a lot of this manual effort isn't having to happen, but it helps you to understand the structure to see it manually entered to start. Okay. And we're just going to have, let's say, there you go. Awesome. So here's another time entry, right? It's like 12 hours of time for project 2. Now remember, we do that in minutes. Here's the really, really cool thing that we can do is we can use what's called a roll-up field. Okay. And this is going to tell us total time on the project. So any time entry, you know, it's being associated every time against this project whenever the project's tagged. And we can use a roll-up field to access these linked records and to specifically access the duration and summarize it. And so you'll see we get a sum in minutes here. Okay. Now, why use minutes? Well, when clicking the buttons, it's going to come through in minutes, and so it'd be good to have minutes. And then if you need to convert that into hours, you could use another field to convert that into hours. Just divide it by 60. So we're going to be doing everything in minutes. Okay, we have our basic structure here. So let's take a look at how we're going to allow someone to clock in. And to do that, we are going to start with an automation. But before we can do that, we need to start to design the page where someone will interact with this data. So we're going to go into the interfaces here really quick, and we're going to start building. We're going to build an interface. It's going to be called time entry. You could give it a cool logo or icon if you want. Okay. And we're going to be using a format that's called record review. And so what this is going to do is put our projects on the left-hand side. And as we click on those projects, we will be able to enter time for those projects. So if I was a user, I could select a project that I want to enter time for, and we're going to change what shows up here in order to allow someone to be able to clock in, clock out, all of that kind of stuff, okay? So we've got our project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to access that time entry linked record field. Remember that one? So we're going to pull that in. Now you see these as cards. We're going to highlight that list and we're going to turn it into a view. Okay, so you see now it's kind of becoming a spreadsheet again. All right. And then we're going to bring in our details. So we're going to click the blue plus in order to bring in date and time. We'll leave duration out of it. Okay. We'll leave the user out of it. That's going to be behind the scenes. So that'd be fine. You could also add it. Doesn't hurt. I'll go ahead and add it. And then we're going to bring in the button also to be able to clock out. We won't be doing the clock out automation quite yet though. So to start, we're going to create a button on this page that allows you to clock in for this project. To clock in for this project, to add a button, we're going to come down here and we'll go ahead and add a button action. You're going to click on the button and this is actually going to instead run an automation. Now we're going to make it black and we'll go ahead and call this clock in. All right, and this is going to run an automation. So now we need to create that automation. We're just going ahead and click the blue plus here to do so. It's going to be called the clock in automation. Now this is going to launch our clock in automation. When a button is clicked is the trigger. And what we're going to do on that record, it's the project record that we're clicking this button on, right? So what we want to do whenever that button is clicked is actually create a record on the time entry table. Remember, because that's where we store all of our time entry information. And there's a couple of things that we want to do. The first thing is that we want to tag the project. So we already know the project because we clicked the button on the project page. So we're going to use the Airtable record ID for the project. Now we need a start date and time. This is where that new feature, access to the specific time, comes in handy because we're going to grab the actual runtime there. Okay. The only other thing that is 100% necessary for this is we want to know who did this. And we actually know who clicked that button because they're logged into Airtable. So you see if we scroll down, user who took the action, we'll go ahead and grab their ID into that user field. That's all that's required for your clock in automation. Okay. So I've toggled it to on. Now we're going to jump back over to the interface and see how this works. All right. So we are here in project 3. Me, Andrew, as a user, could come in here and click clock in. And what you'll see is a record that comes in here that has the start date and time populated. It's tagged it to me as a user. So this is awesome. So that is how we're going to allow to clock in. Again, I could come in and clock in for different projects. Allows me to do that. All right. So that's step 1. Now time goes on, right? And we need to be able to clock out. Now we're going to clock out by clicking on the individual record. The reason we do that instead of just having a button on the page is you can imagine if there's a bunch of different records here, you need to be able to say for which one am I actually clocking out on. Okay, and this is where Zapier comes in. Airtable can't yet handle this on its own, so we're going to use a webhook. I'm going to teach you about webhooks. They're a lot more scary than they sound. They're a lot less scary than they sound. They are just a web address that you send information to. That's it. So it's a URL. And we're going to set it up so that when we click on that, it populates the end date and time. There's one other field that we're going to need in order to accomplish this, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So back in our time entry table, we've got our clock out checkbox here. Now I know you are probably thinking, what does this have to do with anything? Well, we're gonna create a field called trigger. And what this is gonna be is a last modified time field. And this allows us to look at just a specific field. This is how we're gonna tell the Zap to trigger, the Zapier. And what happens with this type of field, I'm gonna put it side by side with the clock out, is when there is an update to this field, you'll get a timestamp, okay? And any successive updates would also re-timestamp it, okay? So this is how we are gonna keep track of some of that information. And what actually ends up happening, what we're gonna be doing is this button is gonna fire off the automation and we're gonna get this date and time, okay? And it's this date and time that we are gonna use for the end date and time. And there's a couple of ways that we can use this date stamp. One is we could have an automation write it into this end date and time, or we could start to use this trigger as our actual end date and time, which is what I'm gonna do in this case, okay? So we're gonna change this from trigger to end date / time, okay? Now we're going to go ahead and delete this old field, and we're going to hop back into the interface and we are going to surface our new end date and time field, okay? Side by side. All right, let's go and learn how to set up the Zap. So if you're new to Zapier, same thing as automations in Airtable, triggers and actions. And the thing that is great about Zapier as opposed to Airtable is there's a lot more applications that you can leverage and modules of things that they've created that you can integrate together very easily. What we're going to be using to start is called webhooks. And again, webhooks are just a URL that you send information to. It's that simple. So we're going to select catch hook. No child key. We don't have to care about any of that. And you'll see that basically all it's done is generated a web address for us. So we're going to copy that and jump back over to Airtable. Now remember we created this formula earlier, okay? And this formula is now going to become the webhook, okay? So you can see this here. Now what we want to do to make this a clickable link is put quotes around it. And before I put the end quote on the very end, all I'm going to do is put a question mark, record ID equals, in the quotes, put a comma, okay, and then record ID. So Airtable, underneath the records, okay, has a code. Now you can't always see it, but you can reference it, called the record ID, and that's a unique string of characters that allow you to know what the record is. And no two record IDs are ever the same. And in order to access it, you just call this function. Now for you Excel whizzes, you're probably thinking, well, you've got to actually join these together, and that's correct. So you will, around this entire thing that you've created, you're now going to say concatenate. You're going to open a parentheses here so that you're containing it all and put another ending one at the end. And go ahead and save that. So you see that now what this looks like is our URL with a unique record ID each time, depending on the record you click on, okay? This is what we are sending to Zapier, the record ID, okay? And there's one other thing. When we switched out our field to calculate the duration in minutes, remember, we actually need to do this, which is change the field that it looks at for the end date and time, which I forgot to do before. But that should fix it. All right, so that looks good. What we want to do now is test this information. So I'm going to hop back over here to Zapier, click on test trigger. Okay. No requests found yet. So we're going to go ahead and have it start listening. Now, in order to send information, we've just got to click on this URL. Okay, so that'll send information. And you'll see now we have request A and we've got a record ID. And now we've just got one more step to do. And that is an Airtable step. So just start typing Airtable, it'll pull up. And what we're going to do is update a record. So you're going to configure that. If you haven't logged in yet, it'll have you configure it. Okay. Find your base. The table that we're updating is going to be time entry, and then the record ID, we're going to be using custom value, and that's going to be coming from that webhook step. So you can see, I could see the previous step. Okay, so we found the record, and what we want to do is, remember, we have this clock out checkbox. So what we want to tell Zapier is, hey, go ahead and check that box. So in computer language, that's 0 or 1. 0 would be empty, 1 would be full. So we're going to do that. And that's going to be our automation. We're going to go ahead and test the step, and then we'll go ahead and turn this on so that it's live by publishing it. So Zapier will go ahead and publish that, and it's now live. So here's the big payoff. Let's see how it all comes together. Into the interface we go. Here's where our employees can log their time, okay? We're gonna publish our recent updates, okay? So let's go ahead and publish our updates. And all right, so here we go. We have some entries that we clocked in on. Okay, remember how we did that? By just clicking clock in, and it comes in. And now we can clock out. Now it opens this window. Just go ahead and close it. That's okay. That's just sending the request. Nothing to do there. And you'll see that now we've got an end date and time. I'll clock out again. End date and time. All right. There it is. So that's it. That's the system. Now, you can configure this in a million different ways, and this is just one. But hopefully this gets your gears turning for how you can replace Toggl and Harvest and use Airtable more to centralize as much as your data in one place as you can. Okay? If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. We would love that. That helps us out. Let me know in the comments what you end up building. Maybe if this saves you time, definitely would appreciate hearing from you. And I'll see you next time.